everybody, it is Romania Black, and welcome. We are starting a brand new series on the channel. If you don't know who I am, my name is Romania Black. I'm a teacher, I'm a speech coach, and on my off time when I'm not working, I like to react to anime and talk about manga and discuss things and just have a good old time and geek out, fangirl, ship, all that fun stuff. And this series, I have been told has a cult following. And I believe it because it came out of nowhere. I guess it started, this series I think ended back in March of 2025. But around January, I had put out a survey on my Patreon asking people for suggestions of shows to watch. And this show came up. It was one of the most requested shows back then. And I just didn't really have a spot to put it. And so I think it was on a poll and got like second or third. And then this last month, it was on a poll and got second place. And I was like, ooh, okay. So I put it on this latest poll and you can see it won by 4 votes. And I was like, woo! But yeah, so Orb on the movements of the earth. Look, if you've watched my channel before, I have no clue what goes on when I start these shows. I go in blind. I have no idea what they're about and I don't want to know. I love diving into a show, being surprised, getting to use my analytical teacher brain to break stuff down. I have a good old time with it. And I like shows to surprise me and for me to evolve my theories, my ideas and concepts as we go through the series. So this one, I'm pretty excited about it. My moderators for Dan to Dan on the channel right now were like, we'll moderate Orb. I was like, okay. So I'm pretty excited. So thank you to Truck and Geen. I think mainly Truck for this one, but thank you Truck and Geen for moderating Orb. I'm super excited. Again, I know nothing about the show except that I believe it's 25 episodes. That's all I know. And that it's on Netflix. That's it. I'm going in 100% blind and it feels good, right? So I don't even know what genre this show is. That's how little I know about it, right? But in any case, the only thing I can think of with orbs is like, I always think of a camera when you take, they're like the little dust orbs. People think they're ghosts, but they're just like the light catches dust and it makes it look like a little ball. So I think of that when I think of orbs, or I think of a sphere. So, and then the earth is technically a sphere. So does orb relate to the earth? We'll find out. We'll find out. My only thing I want to say is as we dive into this series, if you do comment down below, I like to read comments. I have a moderator. So if you would like me to read your comment, just make sure there are no spoilers. So don't tell me stuff that's going to happen. I'm going to find it out. Don't give me hints or clues, or if I get a theory wrong, or if I'm not on the right track, don't try to correct me in the comments because I'll figure it out as we go with the show. But tell me what you think about the episode. And then if you do feel the need to spoil for the sake of other commenters that might read your comment, just make sure to please put it in a spoiler tag. And that way I won't read it and my moderators will know to tell me to avoid it. So thank you. Making the content creator experience a good one. So, thank you all so much for voting for this show. I'm super intrigued and very curious. The only tag that pops up on Netflix, I haven't read the description of the episode because again, want to go in blind. But there was a tag that popped up that said like TVMA for violence. And I was like, oh, okay. So getting ready for that. But yeah. Also, if you would like to see, if you're watching on YouTube and you'd like to go ahead and see episode 2's reaction a week earlier than everybody else on this platform, then you can pop over to my Patreon, check out the tiers, see if any of them float your boat. But otherwise, thank you all so much for joining me on this journey. I'm super, super excited to see what we get, but we're not gonna waste any more time. I've talked long enough. We are gonna start Orb on the movements of the earth and see what the heck is going on. And we're gonna do that here in 3, 2, 1, and I'll see you all on the other side. You know, I was debating whether or not I bring Whiteboard Coon out, but I was going to regret it if I didn't. So this is Whiteboard Coon. Whiteboard Coon is my explainer of all things. And if I feel like going into teacher mode, I bring Whiteboard Coon out. And yeah, I feel like we might need to have him a little bit for this episode. Just a wee bit, just a little bit to kind of to trace our paths in the stars, if you will, and see what all we're going to get. Also, my dog, I have 2 corgis, and my one corgi, Huckleberry, has this is the center of his universe, and he revolves around everything that happens with it and brings it to me constantly. So I'll probably be throwing it to him throughout this entire video. But yeah, okay. I'm really curious. Like, I like Rafal. I like Hubert. I like some of the concepts that this show is giving. But I've never really encountered a show like this where I was like, but where are we going with it? Right? Because, I mean, on the surface, it seems like a pretty simple premise. Hubert's like, you're going to keep looking up at the stars and doing your calculations for astrology to help my research. And if you get caught, well, that's no skin off me. I've already been caught once. I can't get caught again. But your life is at stake, which does add stakes to the story. But I'm like, what else are we going to do? So obviously there's 25 episodes. There's going to be more stuff that we do. But I'm curious to know, like, usually, you know, you get done with a pilot episode and it's either so bonkers and mysterious that you're like, I have no clue where this is going. Or you have kind of here is the conflict. Here's where it's headed. Here's the hero's journey. And I guess that's the thing. It's not that Rafal doesn't have conflict. His conflict is he's claimed he's going to study theology. And I was like, put your foot in your mouth, because now old Professor Ringo Starr is like, well, you can't practice the stars. That's against the deity, the main deity in the sky. And it's like, okay. So there are stakes, but I'm like, as far as like a hero's journey, there's not really one that started for Rafal yet. So I'm curious to know, like, is something going to happen to Hubert? What's going to happen? I'm intrigued to know, what is the story going to do with Rafal? Because Rafal's an interesting character. He's got a lot of layers to him already. And I feel like there's a lot they can do. And then, man, it earned this MA rating. I'm so sorry, but there are two things that I cannot. I can handle a lot of gore. I grew up on a farm. I've seen animals have their like throats slit. I've seen autopsies on animals. I've seen lots of scary, freaky stuff. But there are two things that I'm like, nope, not gonna watch. One of them is having people's nails ripped out. I hate it. I hate having your nails ripped out. I've had a couple of my nails smashed before and had to like peel off the nail. Cannot. Nope. I don't like watching that. So nails and then eyes. Ever since I watched Game of Thrones, and there's a particular season with a particular character who gets his eyes gouged out, and I watched that on TV when it aired live and didn't realize what I was watching until the moment it happened. And you know when you realize something about yourself that you didn't know before? That's when I realized my body can't handle watching eyes messed with. So I should have known after watching A Clockwork Orange. That should have been the first sign, but here we are. So yeah, but I am curious to go back and see what the character who's clearly voiced by Suda. He sounds like he's voiced by Suda. I'm like, okay, a blonde man who doesn't want to work overtime, voiced by Suda. Who would have heard? I'm curious though what this whole, like, it looked like it was cracking something open or like using a chisel, but they go through this hierarchy. Okay, I think the hierarchy is interesting, and I feel like we're going to be using that later on. So let's do the hierarchy. To get bread, because you have to have bread for survival. So for survival, you need bread. And then for bread, you need a coin to buy such bread. The only other way is if you make your own bread. So, but they don't do that. They don't do the whole, you know, your other option, we're going to put the side option over here, is to make your own bread. But that requires a lot of resources that not everybody has. To obtain rights, one offers taxes. So then we have this idea of rights over here. To get rights, you have to pay taxes. Okay. The rights and coins are not entirely connected at the first, right? Then it says to obtain wages, one offers labor. So here's the thing. In order to have the rights, you have to pay taxes. In order to pay taxes, you have to have coins, right? In order to have a coin or a wage, you have to have some labor or you have to work, right? The other option, though, is if you steal, which comes with its own punishments. Oh, is it supposed to be, like, is this moment where we see the thing opening up, is that supposed to be somebody like ripping a nail off? Is that what it is? Like to rip the nail off and you see it coming away, peeling away from the skin? Blech. Maybe. It is. It's peeling the nail. It's ripping the nail off. Ugh. Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. And then, this guy screwing it. I don't think this guy doing this is the guy we saw at the beginning with the nails, but I could be wrong. I'm getting a lot of Attack on Titan vibes with some very dangerous blonde characters. Isayama liked a blonde character. The main mangaka for Vinland Saga likes a blonde character. And why are we surprised that Orb does the same? So then, what must one offer up to obtain the truth of the world? Ooh. So, if this labor is to get coins to find bread to survive, then to discover truth, what is the price? Oh, that question. I'm getting like Full Metal Alchemist vibes, the door of truth. Ooh, what is the price to obtain truth in our world? Well, a lot of people died to obtain truth. So we'll see how far that goes. But immediately right off the bat, they're establishing that there's going to be a lot of violence. There's going to be a lot of gore. There are going to be stakes in this. And we get this little castle that's what I like about it is there is a lot of symbolism in this opening episode. There is a lot of symbolism that is not even, they don't have to speak it. You can look at the episode and see the symbolism in action. So this entire little kingdom that is encased in its little walls, it's not very big. It's all crowded, right? It's crowded. So a crowded group of people in this little area. And what's around it? The world. So there's all this open space. There's an ocean to one side that you can't see because of the walls. But on the other side, there's also a gaping chasm where you could fall to your death on the other side of the walls. And you can't see it either. So it's kind of like this interesting duality where you have this little place, this little kingdom. And on one side is like heaven with the sea and the open sky. And on the other side is hell with the chasm. I'm digging it. I'm digging the symbolism. So somewhere in the early 15th centuries, the 1400s, in the Kingdom of P, you say? So that's where we're at. We're at the Kingdom of P. I am sure if you're a history buff or a history major, then you probably know what this is referencing. But I am an English major, not a history major, and so I do not know. But that's okay. So, and maybe it's just a fictional place that they just called Kingdom of P, whatever. As green is my favorite color, I appreciate the aesthetic. One thing I also like about this series is it encapsulates in the first scene the use of shadows and the use of light versus shadows. I was talking about Attack on Titan in that series, which Attack on Titan is one of my favorite series. Isayama does a really good job of using light sources as beacons of truth. And since this series is somewhat about discovering the truth of the world, I think it's interesting how we have a play on shadow and darkness with light, which is interesting. You have Hubert, who is a dark-haired character stuck in the shadows, and you have Rafal, which is bathed in the light with his golden blonde hair. It's a nice duality. But yeah, so we see people walking around town, everything like that. We also see, as we navigate the corridors, you see the homeless population sitting on the stairs in the darkness and in the shadows. And Rafal was once someone that was destitute as well, so he kind of knows what that life is like. And I think it's interesting because if you notice, the people on the stairs are just kind of left there. They're all congregated there, but they're not talking to one another. They're just all exhausted, miserable, starving. There's not a sense of community there because they're just barely hanging on and living. But yeah, and then opposed to the shadow, there is the very prestigious boys' school bathed in light with sunshine and open spaces. Everybody's walking around there and no homeless people here, mind you. But yeah, and then we see Rafal walking down the streets. Rafal is like freaking Belle from Beauty and the Beast. I was trying to think of what that color blue was reminding me of, and Rafal wearing that bright blue. In Beauty and the Beast, the Disney film, the creators had Belle be the only character in the series wearing blue because it made her stand out. And here in this series, Rafal is the only character wearing blue, so it makes him stand out. Now, I don't think that Hubert's gonna be his beast, but maybe in a platonic mentor way, rather than Beauty and the Beast. But we have Rafal, and we're gonna talk about him, right? We're gonna talk about Rafal. I like the visage of the kid stealing the boots off the man that's passed out there. And so Rafal walks through the streets, kind of bathed. He's kind of in the shadow and in the light. And then he gets cornered by Gon from Hunter x Hunter here. Who's going off to the school, right? But Rafal walking in the shadows, he takes his time. He doesn't run to the all-boys school. Because back in these days, ladies weren't allowed to think. So we cut to Suda's character. He's unnamed at this point, but God, I am not a fan of the nails. I was like, as soon as I saw those nails, I was like, bleh. So he's like 2 for Mazur. He's basically talking about how many nails it took to get people to talk. So 2 for Mazur, and then he says for Bolansky, it was 4. Yeah, he's not the guy. I think if he's the guy from the beginning, he's trimmed his beard and gotten a haircut. But it's probably a different guy. Maybe not. I only realized it after assuming this line of work. But you know what troubles people the most when their nails are removed. Yeah, it's a freaking pain. It hurts like hell. They can't hold objects. You can have a grip without nails. I can assure you. It's just going to suck. Yeah, his character's interesting. Suda's the simplest things seem to trouble people the most. So what does he ask for here? He says, okay. And he's like, now then, you've hidden research materials that blaspheme against the church doctrine. Oh, so he's a heretic. Well, that adds some stakes. I don't want to see Rafal get his nails clipped off. So we have Suda's character, who I'm just going to call Suda. And he basically is an enforcer that tortures people. That tortures for information. Awesome. Great. And so he doesn't seem to think he has anything. I'm like, nope. Gross. Blech. No, thank you. So he's like, where are the materials? And he's like, I'm not telling you the truth ever. There's only 10 nails. And he's like, well, this could take a while. And he's like, just get it over with. And then Suda's character brings out the trump card, which is a whole pile of nails. And he says, oh, for Negri, there was 68. And he's like, because nails grow back, you know. Now, that would imply, if that were the case, because if there's 10, that would imply that he ripped them off almost 7 times, unless he did toes as well, and then that would have cut it down quite a bit. But they all look like fingernails. They seem pretty identical. It does take a while for your nail to grow back, like a week or 2 at least. So that means you were imprisoned for quite a while he ripped your nails off over and over again. So that's exciting. But yeah, that guy's like, well, shit. I also feel like, Suda's character could have lied and said, yeah, I mean, he might have a good poker face. And he's like, yeah, it took 68 times. And it's because it was a smart lie that the guy didn't know it was a lie. And he's like, okay, I'll talk. Because he's like, I want to go home early. I don't want to waste my time with you. But after he hears him talk, they're going to burn him at the stake. So anyway, Professor Ringo Starr asks, what lies at the center of the universe? And Gon over here, Kochansky, says it's love. He's freaking Vash from Trigun. Says love is the center of the universe, overflows with God's love. So they talk about that the center of the universe is God's love. Which, sure. Okay. I mean, yes, you could say that. He's like just a model citizen. I'm like, he'll probably be the first to die in this series, but maybe not. And they're like, that's a little too abstract. We need something more concrete. And Rafal, who's like, I know this, is like, the center of the universe is the earth, of course. So he basically means like the center of the universe is the earth itself. And that everything revolves around the earth. We know this for many reasons. Heavy objects fall downward, which is the center of gravity, but he doesn't understand exactly what gravity is. Earth is the lowest sphere in the center of the universe. And he's like, well, exactly. So Professor Ringo Starr is all about basically keeping up with the church's belief that Earth is the center of it all. And look, I love It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia when Mac's character talks about the creation versus evolution debate and about how scientists have been wrong throughout history and Galileo was wrong and people have it wrong and stuff. But it's an interesting commentary in this episode about when people get an ideology and get so much power behind it that it enables them to do horrible things in the name of that ideology. And we've seen it time and time again. Speaking of Beauty and the Beast, tale as old as time. People using religion to fuel their own self-righteous agendas and to secure their authority and indoctrination over other people. And it's like, yeah, we've seen that. We've seen that quite a bit in our lifetimes. So this is, unfortunately, the 1400s were not a great time for a lot of people, and anybody against the church, it wasn't a great time. And then he's like, well, the honor is mine. And everybody's like, are you too bragging? He's like, well, not at all. So he's like, Rafal is going to university. And he's like, these days only a handful of people can enter, but to do so at the age of 12 is truly amazing. So essentially, Rafal's a prodigy. He was an orphan, we find out. He was an orphan. He was on the streets. And then it seems that the priest took him in. And then at the age of 12, he's going to the university, which honestly, if you were a prodigy and you were super smart at that time, would not be unheard of. The schooling system, even in Europe or whatever, was a lot different back in medieval times. Your life expectancy was only about 37 years. So, 12 is actually halfway there. So, if you lived to 50, you were doing pretty good. And so, have you thought about the appropriate field of study? And they're like, medicine. And he's like, oh, well, I want to study theology. Now, I'm surprised he chose theology. And then the background gets to be like the He-Man music video where he's like, yay! Yeah, it's like Four Non-Blondes playing. And he says, as we all know, theology is the highest academic field. Now, it's interesting because I tried in my comments and I try to in my classes teach the idea that you cannot speak in extremes, right? You can't say, well, everything is like this, or all is like this, or no one does that, because you're just setting yourself up to be proven wrong, right? When he's like, everyone knows, and it's like, well, do they all know? So he wants to choose theology because it is the highest academic field. He's like, I want to challenge myself to do something that's difficult and highly, highly prestigious. He's like, we owe our lives to God. A theologist analyzes the Holy Scripture logically, which I'm like, okay, you get to Kings and tell me about that HGTV chapter set of how to build an altar 7,000 times, because I've read that part. So, yeah, how to analyze it logically so that we can deepen our faith. Here's the thing. My friend and I were talking about this the other day. The idea of analyzing scripture to deepen our faith. Here's the thing. I feel like until you get to the New Testament, once you get to the New Testament, it may be different. I've been spending the last year and a half rereading the Bible because I am a Christian, like a page or two every week, because I'm just stretching it out. And the Old Testament, let me tell you, and the Old Testament being well used up until, 2000 BC, whatever, or 0 BC. Point being, the Old Testament's got a lot of contradictions in it. A lot of contradictions. Because if you're reading it in one person's account, they're talking about God helping them to be merciful and do this. And in another account, God's like, let's kill an entire people and commit genocide. And it's like, okay. And then in another account, God's like, actually, I just want you to like kill a bunch of sheep and pray to me. And it's like, okay. There are accounts all throughout the Old Testament that are very distinctly different from one another. Distinctly. There's connections, obviously, but there's a lot of distinctions. And my friend and I were talking about it because we're both Christians. And we were talking about how, you know, as a Christian, you have a faith in a higher power. You have a faith in a God. If you believe in Jesus, you go through that, you know. If you're a Jew, it's different. But we acknowledge, or we should acknowledge as Christians, that the Bible itself was not carved by a deity. A deity didn't grab a quill and write out the passage. It's an institution written by humans. Man has written the account. And based on those different books, man put a different agenda in some of those texts. So you, through your faith, kind of have to read between the lines and figure out, okay, what is this text saying? What is the agenda of the time? What is this person trying to get out of it? What is the point? And you have to kind of do a little history with it. And you can still gain a lot of faith and spiritual peace from reading that text, but you can't go into that text reading it word for word and taking every account as is, because otherwise I've ate pork the last 30 something years, and if it's telling me I'm going to hell for eating pork, I was doomed a long time ago. So I feel comfortable in my faith, but when he's talking here about logically analyzing the religious texts, I'm like, that's taking someone's interpretation and someone's writing and trying to give a definitive interpretation and definition for it. But if you're not that author, is that even possible, is the point that I'm making in all of this, right? So it's interesting. And so, of course, he's like, I don't believe I have more talent than anyone else, which is a lie. I'm merely lucky, which is maybe not a lie. That's why I want to repay that good fortune by choosing a field that will be useful to the faithful. And of course, Ringo Starr's like, oh, what a magnificent answer. And he's like, oh, stop. I love that shot of him with the smirk as soon as he says, oh, stop. And it's like, this 12-year-old thinks he's too good. This 12-year-old is convinced. He's like, this world is so easy. But I'm like, my dude, you're about to learn it's not so easy. He's like, though it pains me to say it, the world is full of fools. I myself was born an orphan, and I've had my share of poverty, misery, pity, and vulnerability, and every other disadvantage. But above all that, I'm good at living smart. Well, apparently he's like, I'm really good. My philosophy is to live rationally. So he's talking about living rationally. And as far as he has known up until this point, his whole thing is like, well, if this equals this, and this equals this, and this equals this, then I have to do A, B, and C. And he's like, well, if my goal is to rise up the ladder and secure myself a stable position in the world, then theology is the best way to go, because that's the field respected the most, and that will get me the most money, that will get me the most secure future. Easy street, right? Easy street. But I think it's interesting here that this series is already talking about what is the price of selling out, essentially. He's selling out his passion. His passion's in astronomy. But astronomy is about furthest away from theology. So it's curious. He's like, I want to live rationally. If one this is the part where I'm like, oh, you're 12. Because he says, if one ignores irrational emotions like love, avoids wasteful desires, and makes reasonable decisions, well, one can live comfortably. Why, yes, if you live rationally without any temptation, well, sure, absolutely you can. The problem is humanity is easily tempted, and humanity is very flawed. And Rafal is right, the world is full of fools. But, love makes fool of us all. Greed makes fools of us all. And there are some things in this world that are not so easily explained. And that can make a fool of you as well. So I find it so interesting that this 12-year-old's like, I'm not falling in love. I'm not going to have any desires. And I was like, has puberty hit yet, sir? We'll see about that. And then he has the Fibonacci sequence there where he talks about that which is rational is always beautiful. So basically saying that is rational equals beautiful, which, basically is saying that order is beautiful, structure is beautiful. But in my mind, and the mind of many others, the world is full of chaos, and that chaos can be beautiful. And that's kind of what Hubert gets at, being like, the stars are chaos, and that is beauty. Just the rational, it can be beautiful, but if that's all you believe, you're going to get trapped in that, right? By sticking to that belief. What does he say here? By sticking to that belief, people see me as dignified, wise, humble, and capable. But again, if you're selling out and that's not what you really think, eventually it's going to come back and bite you, right? So, in any case, he's just being old He-Man here. And I love this scene with Gon. What's his name? He's like, well, that's awesome, Rafal. I can brag about knowing you. And he's like, oh, I'm nothing special. And he's like, well, Kochansky. He's like, simpletons like Kochansky respect me right away, so they're good to have around. Here's the thing. People like Kochansky, yes, if they're loyal and they'll follow you around and be like Kronk from Emperor's New Groove, then sure, they're great to have around. But if Kochansky is somebody who is obedient and easily told what to do and doesn't stand up for himself or any of his beliefs and just follows whatever people tell him to, then he's going to be also easily swayed and is not going to be loyal to you, and maybe not somebody that you want to, that won't be good to have around. And then he says, oh, you're like a sage. He's like, you're exaggerating. You're like a god. And that's when the teacher's like, excuse me, humans aren't gods. What have we been teaching you the last 12 years of your life, kids? Yeah. He's like, that's heresy. And so he's like, oh, forgive me. I mean, it's a good representation in this moment, and it's a good scene to show how easily people can deify others. It's so good. And even though this kid's been in this class where Ringo Starr's been telling him over and over again that God is responsible for this, God is that, it was like that so easy for him to look at Rafal and be like, you're a god. And it's like, what have you been learning? And you instantly threw that out the window the moment you were in awe. Some people are very manipulated, easily manipulated. And he's like, some things can't be said out loud. So then Podesky, or whatever his name is, he has, what does that say? Is the catalog of guide? Yes. I saw my first 6th magnitude star. And he's like, oh, I see. Then you have to stop. He's like, you have to devote all your time to theology from now on. You're not going to have time for astronomy. He's like, no. And Rafal's like, oh, I didn't think that was a part of this. I'm like, yeah, of course. He's like, I want you to pick up my acquaintance Hubert tomorrow. Now, he believes, so he says, that Hubert has been reformed. He's been recanted. He's been reformed. We find out that Hubert freaking lied about that, which I'm like, looking at him for 2 seconds, I was like, I don't think he's reformed. Now, the question is, did old Professor P send Rafal to get Hubert because he knew that Hubert was lying and he's testing Rafal to see how loyal and truthful he's being to him, or if he's lying to him and he's going to sell? Here's my thing. That professor, even though he took Rafal in off the streets and gave him a warm place to eat and some food in his belly, do I think he'd sell him out in a heartbeat? Absolutely, I do. Because I think that he's so deep into the system, I think that he would sell him out. But my curiosity is with how trusting is he of Rafal, and does he trust that Hubert has reformed, or is he setting them both up? That we don't know. We do not know. But I feel for Rafal because, he's like, you don't have time for astronomy. No more astronomy. And he's like, well, it's only natural. I've got no time for astronomy. But he literally has like a window open to the moon and stars, and that's his passion. And it's like, do you sell out everything you love for the fame and the gains and the money of it all, or do you keep doing what you love and take that chance? That's a really good question. That's a really good question. And I mean, to put, I guess, a good modern analogy to it, and I'm sure there's lots of modern analogies. I mean, I watch Drag Race and King of Drag, and the art form of drag, depending on where you live, is very ostracized in certain communities, and there's a lot of prejudice against it. And all it is an art form. It's expression. It's an expression of an art form, of a passion, of a persona. And I love watching it because, one, I can't sew. And so I'm always in awe of what they can create, because I'm like, that's so impressive, and there's so much creativity. And it's just, it bends gender, and it bends your expectations, and it makes you think about things. Like, it's so provocative. And I love watching people create stuff. So I like it for that reason. But I also like it because I like supporting things that are kind of oppressed. And I find that people's stories and who they are, and it's important to recognize those stories and hear those people's voices. So I really love watching that series. But it's kind of like this. There's been contestants on the show who have said that they've been scared to perform and do that art because they're afraid of being judged and persecuted. And it's like, yeah, it's like, do you choose to fit into the modern mold of society, or do you choose to gamble and instead pursue your passion and live your life to the fullest? And there are repercussions, and it's so interesting. But yeah, I love that shot of his eye with the stars. Like, you can tell Rafal loves the stars and he wants to study it. And man, this series is also reinforcing the idea that the 1400s, I know a lot of people say we're born in the wrong time. No, as a woman being born in the 1400s, absolutely not. I'm glad I was not in that time period. But, you know, it's understandable why the church was afraid of people studying the stars, because when you study the stars and you try to, you know, open your mind up, then it's not that it questions your faith, because to be honest, I have seen things in the world and met people of all different cultures and religions and things, and it hasn't shaken my own faith. But what it does do is it shakes your faith of human authority within those structures. So it's not that Rafal's religious beliefs could be shaken by his love of astronomy. No, but the church itself, who is a entity of power and authority, if you realize that those people running that church are no smarter than you, and you hold just as much as authority and power as them, they lose that power. And that's what they don't want. It's not that they're afraid that you're going to lose faith. That's not it at all. It's that you won't give your money, your power to that person, to that human anymore. And that human is the one that has issue in it. And that's what it really is about. And it's so fascinating to see this through this 12-year-old's lens as he's being kind of put to the test with this. It's fascinating, right? He says, there was a time when I saw a rational beauty in the orderly movements of the stars. So he said he saw this rational beauty in the movement of stars, which he talks about the order. And yeah, the stars do kind of have an order. But the thing is, it's the earth, it's proving the church wrong. The universe doesn't revolve around the earth. Every star's movement has its own complex calculations. And then he says, continuing with astronomy isn't rational. And plus, the world of stars is so far away. No matter how we stretch, we can never reach them. Which is so funny because, you know, we have reached the stars as humans. That's the crazy part, right? That's the crazy part. We have essentially, in all essence and purposes, reached the stars. But I love that he's torn between pursuing something that is tangible and relative to the world he lives in and logically makes sense, but at the same time, he wants to pursue something he's so passionate about and loves, even when it doesn't quite make sense to, right? So then he walks by and sees the heretic execution. It's just your typical Wednesday. And the crazy part is everybody's just standing there watching someone be burned to death. And you see, is that the guy whose nails were ripped off? Probably. Oh, his face is like where he can't yell anymore. It's just completely burned. But his eyeball looks over at him and stares. I like to focus on eyes in this episode. It's crazy. But his eyes like focus on him, on Rafal. And again, talking about symbolism, just the fact that these people can just stand by watching someone be murdered, which unfortunately is still present in our current timeline in many instances. So that's problematic. But yeah, and then he tries to, and this is the thing, he feels guilty because he sees the eyes. The eyes are windows to the soul, bitch. And he sees in the eyes and he feels bad. And then he tries to convince himself. Rafal says, well, they deserved it. They defied God. Surely there were chances to recant. I mean, it's kind of the argument where people look at somebody on the street that's homeless and they're like, well, they had a chance to get a job. They had a chance to do this. They sinned and that's what caused that. Or somebody that had been addicted to drugs. They're like, well, they did drugs and it's their fault and they did that. And it's like, yeah, that may be true. But I'm like, how easy would it be for you to be in that position and you want mercy? And then the world turns its back on you. Because Rafal's on a delicate slope with this deal of with Hubert, where he's on this delicate balance of him saying, oh, well, they're heretics. They defied God. They deserve to be punished. I'm like, Rafal, you're helping Hubert with this astronomy thing. If you are caught, you may be up on that spike getting ready to be lit on fire. And then what are you going to say? Are you going to beg for your life? Or are you going to sit there and go, well, I had my chance to recant. I defied God. I guess I deserve this. What are you going to do when it's in what are you going to do when the ball's in your court? Right? He's like, they brought it on themselves. I'm like, oh, pot calling the kettle black. So then we hear Suda say, hurry up and burn already. And he's just yawning. Like, what is his deal? He's like, what's taking so long? And then Rafal's like, what's with that guy? I wondered for a second if they knew each other, but apparently they don't. So he's seen him. He's like, let's get out of here. So he's seen them. We'll see if they see each other again, right? So he goes to pick up Hubert, who is this massive man, which Rafal's not very tall to begin with, but Hubert is pretty big. He looks like, you know what he reminds me of? Okay. Is it Neil Gaiman? It's his, what is Discworld? Discworld is, let me find Discworld, is by Terry Pratchett. Yes. Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman were friends. But he's the author, Terry Pratchett. And so Terry Pratchett has this series called Discworld. I've not read all the books, but I have looked at one of the series. It's one I watch it during the holidays, but it's called Hogfather. But essentially, the character of Death is presented in Discworld, and the character of Death, the Grim Reaper, has an actual characterization and walks around and does things. And so Hubert kind of reminds me of the Grim Reaper in Discworld series, especially with his deep voice. And he looks just freaking intimidating. He looks like he's been tortured. Like he's like got the scars and stuff. Like they've cut his mouth and everything. And he's blinded, right? Well, he's not fully blind because he can read some of the paper, but he can't look up at the stars anymore. But even if he can't see well, he sees right through Rafal. Because here's the deal. Rafal is used to dealing with simpletons. A teacher that just wants you to be a yes man, and then he'll just praise everything you say as long as it's agreeing with him. And then just townsfolk who are fake. And so he, by also being fake, can get around and work his way up the ladder. Hubert's a guy that served time and is the real deal. And he's like, your fake bullshit's not going to work on me. So nice try. I also like that Hubert makes Rafal slow down, because Rafal had been in a hurry the entire episode to get through and be like, let's just get from point A to point B. And Hubert makes him kind of slow himself and take the time. And so then he's like, well, I owe it to God and everyone who supported me. And he's like, are you going to study astrology or astronomy at the university because you have your device there? What does he call it? He gives it a name. He says the astrolabe. And he's like, oh, this old thing made out of wood that I finally crafted. He's like, it's just a hobby. He's like, I've been thinking of quitting. And he says, well, you're rather insincere about it. Like, he doesn't believe him. And then he talks about, like, do you have any, like, studies? And he's like, what were you researching before? Well, he's researching the stars. And he's like, these are actually really good. So again, I don't know if Professor P set them up knowing that Rafal likes astrology and to test his faith to see if he was going to go along with Hubert and if Hubert was going to really be recanted or not. It almost feels like a setup. But I don't know if the professor was really sincere and he's like, oh, he's reformed. That kid's going to give up, astronomy for theology, or if he's setting them up to prove them to be heretics. I don't know which one it is, to be quite honest. I guess we'll find out. But he convinces him that he's like, I lied about recanting. He's like, a researcher never gives up his passion. He's like, I'm going to avoid getting caught by blackmailing you. And that way you're the one that gets caught instead. So how about that? And I just love that he like has this white black hair and has the knife to his throat. And he's like, look, my eyes have weakened. You're going to do the observations. If I'm caught twice, I'm going to get executed. So you're going to do it for me. And he's like, if you do anything, refuse, try to get away, whatever, I'll kill you. And Rafal's like, seriously? He's like, really, man? I also love that throughout most of this conversation, they're in the shadows. That part's really well done. So it gives like, you have the bright light creating this shadow. But then, Rafal's like, well, I go to this one spot to look at the stars. And he's like, oh no, I know a better spot. Let me show you. You're in for a surprise. I'll tell you tomorrow. That was like the icing on the cake. Because Rafal's like, well, I'm going to go turn him in. I'm not going to work with him. But Hubert hit the good spot. Hubert hit exactly where it hurts. And that's when he told Rafal that, hey, I know a place where you can see the best stars. The best stars. Aren't you curious? If you were a real astronomer, you'd be curious. And that, again, for everything that Rafal talks about being rational, where he's like, oh, I live rationally. The rational thing to do, if that were the case, would be to go and tell them immediately about Hubert. That'd be the rational thing to do. Turn him in, move on with your life, and you save your skin. You don't have to worry about anything. He'll be killed. That's the end of it. But that's not what he does. So I'm like, are you really living rationally? Or is this your first dip into the unrational? Because he's like, this is way too dangerous. It's not rational to do this. But curiosity kills the cat. And then he sees all the stars in this field. The altitude is high. The view of the field is broad. It's perfect for observations. I love it. So he asks him to calculate the time retroactively, and he does it for the stars. And Hubert is impressed by how fast he was able to do it. And he says, what are you going to use these records for? What's the forbidden research? And he's like, well, it's actually proving that we're not the center of the earth. So Aristarchus, I want to see what Aristarchus of Samos is. Okay, we're going to look him up real quick. Is a Greek. He is an ancient Greek astronomer and mathematician from 310 BC to 230 BC, who presented the first heliocentric model that placed the sun at the center of the universe, with the earth revolving around the sun once a year and rotating on its axis once a day. He also supported the theory of Anaxagoras, according to the sun, saying it was just another star. It's crazy that these guys in 310 BC, in like 3-2 something BC, were predicting all of this, and then it got turned around by the church and everything, and then we went back and be like, well, no, actually, So, yeah, he was influenced by the concept presented by Philolaus of Croton of a fire at the center of the universe. He recast the central fire as the sun and arranged the other planets in their correct order of distance around the sun. It's crazy this happened thousands of years ago. It's just crazy to me, right? But yeah, heliocentrism. The original text has been lost, but a reference book by Archimedes entitled The Sand Reckoner, describes a work in which Aristarchus advanced the heliocentric model as an alternate hypothesis to geocentrism. Cool. He knew that a moving Earth model would imply that the stars should exhibit parallax, that is, movement of the stars relative to each other as the Earth moves around the sun. But however, since stellar parallax is only detectable with telescopes, it was not observed at the time. It's so crazy. They were onto stuff like even that far back. And this implied a universe much larger than it had been believed. And it is something, right? It is insane to fathom, like if you look up at the sky and think of all the different stars and how big our galaxy, our universe is, it's kind of, our brains can't quite wrap around it. Like we can, but we can't, right? To think of how big the world is. Your brain can't quite process it. And it's just so interesting, right? After realizing the sun was much larger than the Earth and the other planets, Aristarchus concluded that planets revolved around the sun. There's some cool models and things and math that was being used. The bane of an English teacher's existence, math, the other side of the sun, the other side of the brain, huh? But that's so interesting. Cool. Good for them. But yeah, so basically Hubert is saying that he's like, have you heard of this guy, right? And then he says, what's that? He's like, well, in case if you don't know, he's like, that thing you told the teacher at the beginning is wrong. I do think that Rafal does a really good job of drawing the Earth as the center. It's this beautiful like flower inside this kind of a kaleidoscope. It's really pretty. It's very pretty. And he's like, yeah. He's like, Ptolemy discovered the truth over 1,000 years ago. Which this would have been 1400, so that would have been around 400, so like 400 years later than the other guy, the philosopher. Plus, common sense tells us the Earth is special. And here's the thing, and this is kind of, again, interesting symbolism in this. The Earth is special. Humans are special. We are all born, if you watch Attack on Titan, you're born special, as you know. But the crazy thing is, just because you're special doesn't mean that the world revolves around you. That's the crazy part. Just because you're special, main character syndrome, right? I looking at TikTok trends and things on social media. Main character syndrome is huge right now amongst like Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and the world does not revolve around you. It really doesn't. Surprisingly, we are very tiny in comparison to the rest of the universe. And he's like, I believe God would place it at the center. I'm like, I don't know. God's got a pretty wicked sense of humor. I feel like to humble you'd be like, actually, no, you guys are, was the end of Rocky Horror? He's like, and crawling along the planet's face, whereas the ant-like species, the human race. I'm just paraphrasing, but still, yes. He's like, in that case, is there beauty in such truth? And Rafal's like, what? Is the universe you described beautiful? I love that Rafal's like, what? And he's like, whether it's beautiful or not depends on the sense of the individual. Well, but the individual, where we were revolving around, it has nothing to do with scholarly truth. You didn't answer the question. You just rotated around it. Do you find it to be beautiful? And Rafal, is like, I've not had to really think about this in this respect. We were talking about rational equaling beautiful and the movement of the stars. And, well, I love the animation of the sequence with the stick. It's almost like he has a conductor and like a little, like a wand that you'd use as a teacher. He says, well, it seems a little too complicated. And he's like trying to say it as this 12-year-old. With this model, every planet has to be calculated separately. The way the movements fail to form a single orderly system is not rational. And in that sense, it is not beautiful. Because he talks about, he said before, rational equals beautiful. But that's if there is an order to it. And the way that you've described it, whereas the Earth is the center and these planets are all in disarray and you're trying to figure out this complicated system of how do they move in relation to the Earth, yeah, it doesn't make sense and it's not beautiful. And then Hubert says, well, here's the thing. There could never be one system that accounted for the entire universe. Ho, ho, ho. And he says it's a major fault. And I like Hubert saying, I don't want to live. What does he say there? Because he goes, I don't want to live in a universe that isn't beautiful. He's like, there has to be an order to all this. He's like, but to place beauty before logic is backwards. Well, sometimes the things that are beautiful in life don't have a logic to them. And you just have to go, wow, that's just crazy, but that's the way the world is. As long as the stars move and the sun rises, that's it. And he's like, what if neither the sun nor the stars actually move? And it's the earth that moves. I love it. And I love that he just rocks this kid's mind. This 12-year-old's mind is just completely, it's that moment as a teacher where you say something and it's when a teacher says something and it clicks and you go, oh, and your brain just has that aha light bulb moment. It's the best feeling. It's so good because when you're explaining something and it clicks and you're like, oh my God, that all makes sense. It's such a good feeling because you feel like you've cracked the code, right? And you're in on the secret. And that's what Professor P doesn't want you to know, right? Because you're in on the real thing. You're in on the joke. In my universe, the earth moves in two ways, on its axis and around the sun. I love it. I love it. The cosmos is unified under a single order. Yes. But that challenges the authority of the church. And they call it heliocentrism. How about that? Oh, I love it. This is so, again, I don't know where the series is taking us. I don't know what we're doing with Hubert and with Rafal for 25 episodes. I have no clue. Suda's character is obviously playing a part. Do I think Kobachki's playing a part? Maybe. The professor, sure. But I'm really curious with Hubert and Rafal and their developing relationship. Like, what's that going to be? What's that going to be like? What are the stakes going to end up being? Where we go with this? I'm excited. Yes, I'm excited to see where it's going to take us. And if anything, I've talked for nearly an hour about all of the symbolism and everything that it represents. So I'm super excited. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this reaction discussion. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I hope you all also have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm going to be back pretty soon, with episode 2 of Orb on the movements of the earth. And I'll see you all then. Bye.